Well, I got to tell you, we are blessed this week having this group here. And we're glad that each and every one of you is here today too. And I'm not going to have a long message today. Well, maybe I will. But I want to talk about a time when Jesus, the kingdom that He wants to build here on earth. And the kingdom He wants to build is one of peace. And when we think of kingdoms, we think of the ones that we want to get. We think of the wars that we fight to overtake people. We think of the lives that are being lost even now in Afghanistan and places like that, and the terrorists working, and that's how we think we overtake. And yet, there was a day when Jesus told His disciples to go into town and get Him a donkey. And they got Him a donkey with a colt. And Jesus climbed on that colt and He rode into town on the back of a colt. He didn't come in on a war horse. He came in on a donkey. And He came in to bring peace. A peace that passes all understanding. He didn't come to have us fight about things. He came in to see us find peace within our hearts. You can read the story in Luke 19 about Him getting that donkey, about Him sending disciples into town. And during His 3 years of ministry, He taught, He healed, He partied. Yes, I said Jesus partied. Because He did. He went to weddings. He took people, but He built relationships. Just like the relationships that are being built here between churches, between people. The best thing in your life is your relationships, and He built intimate ones. And most of all, Jesus loved. He loved Levi. He loved the Samaritan woman. He loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha and the disciples. And the list goes on and on. And even His greatest commandments are very simple. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. But when He's on the back of this donkey, it's a short time before He has to die. He's going to take one last kick at the cat to see if He can get us to understand. On His way in, He knows He's headed to death. He knows most of the crowd will turn on Him and all His disciples will leave Him there in the dust. He knows whether 2 men that He heals will remain faithful. And yet He shows compassion and love. He doesn't worry about what He has to face. He worries about us. So they head into town. He rides into town on that baby donkey, gentle, not warlike, bearing salvation. At that moment, people lined the road with coats as if they were rolling out the red carpet as we would now. They cried, "Blessed is He who comes in the name of the Lord." And for a moment, they get some sense of who this Jesus is. And in His last appearance, He shows them that it's not going to be a physical strength that overtakes the world. Jesus says He will bring peace. Jesus says His people will share in peace. Colossians 3:12-15 says this, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful." Jesus came to bring His kingdom of peace to this world, to Kirkland Lake, to Toronto, to everywhere in between. And yet, we haven't figured out, we don't have the message. And He brought it for everybody. And that's really the message we need to have today. Many people know, many people don't. John 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." But then 17 says this, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." When we think about Jesus bringing peace, and we think about how he came to save the world, the question might come into your mind about being too far gone. You might say, "No, this isn't for me. I've been too bad. I've fallen too far." Well, I want to read you something from the scriptures once again. Luke 23:40-43 says this, "But the other criminal rebuked him. 'Don't you fear God,' he said, 'since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong.' Then he said, 'Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.' And Jesus answered him, 'I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise.'" A man condemned to death, hanging on a cross next to Jesus, who had done something so vile, so rotten in the eyes of the world that he had to be put to death. And Jesus was able to say to him, "You will be with me today in paradise." And that's a remarkable promise, and that's what I want to talk about as my final thing. I called my friend Steve, he's a pastor of Free Methodist Church in Campbellford not that long ago.